Hey guys, tonight we venture into the desert's heart to uncloak the whispered secrets buried beneath the Sphinx's stoic gaze. Picture yourself trudging through fine, golden sand as dawn's first light fractures the horizon into molten orange. You probably won't survive this unscathed duel, lose a shoe. Get sand in every crevice of your life, but you won't die of boredom, I promise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments so we can share this moment across time zones. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint against a sudden gust, clutching your jacket around your wrists as sand whips past in tiny whirlwinds. That fine. Grit scratches at your skin like a million microscopic tongues, and your ears ring with the wind's low whistle. Each footfall sinks into uneven dunes, no friendly carpet, here reminding you that centuries of wind and wandering have sculpted this landscape into an ever-shifting labyrinth. Ahead, a hulking silhouette emerges, its outline blurred by heat haze. Daring you to approach, as you draw closer, the colossal body of the Great Sphinx materializes from the dust. This lion, once king, once god, stands 73 meters long and 20 meters high, a marvel believed to have been carved around 2500 BC during Pharaoh Khafu's reign. You press a hand to its sandy flank, feeling the cold limestone beneath your palm. A jarring contrast to the desert's baking embrace. It's wild to think primitive masons heaved these enormous blocks into place with nothing but copper chisels and sheer determination. No forklifts. No forklifts. No machines. You grin at the absurdity of modern gym memberships when these workers got a full-body workout daily. In the pale glow of dawn, you notice strange discolorations across the stone. Faint streaks that legends claim came from ancient floodwaters. Fringe theorists whisper that the Sphinx predates Khafre by thousands of years. The work of a lost civilization or even Atlantean architects whose docks melted into myth. You roll your eyes, mind bracing against moonshot conspiracy theories. Can't help but feel a shiver of possibility. Every shadow seems to murmur buried storylines. Your gaze settles on the face, its missing nose, lending it an air of tragic nobility. Historians still argue whether that absence was the work of iconoclasts in the 14th century or simply relentless erosion by wind and sand. Whatever the cause, you can't help but admire the sculptor's vision. A human intellect sitting atop a lion's body, blending fierce strength with calm thought. You brush your fingers along a weathered cheek, tasting grit and centuries of secrets. Around you, the desert exhales warmth as sunbeams begin to stretch across the plateau. The rising light casts long, lean shadows, making the Sphinx's features seem to breathe and shift. You breathe in the scent of sun-baked stone, a dry perfume that mingles with the faint trace of incense from offerings made millennia ago. It's easy to imagine priests here before dawn, clutching pottery jars filled with oil, chanting praises to Ra as they faced the sun. You laugh softly at your own cinematic daydream. No latte for these early birds. Just stale pita and pure adrenaline. Yet even the humor fades as you consider the guardianship this statue claims. It has watched over Giza for ages, a silent sentinel to glinting pyramids and shifting sands. Shadows slip across its paws, urging you to peer between them, to wonder what lies just out of reach beneath gargantuan Haunches. As your eyes adjust, you notice a narrow gap between loose stones at the base, a hidden entrance. Maybe, historians still argue whether the builders ever intended secret chambers here, or if later, tomb hunters hollowed the rock in search of buried treasure. You crouch, brushing away sand, heart thudding as you imagine peering into chilly darkness where no light has touched for centuries. A crow caws overhead, startling you. You brush sand from your pants and rise slowly, anticipating the next leg of this journey where we'll uncover the sweat, the tools, and the staggering ambition that went into carving this beast from living rock. But for now, you stand at daybreak's edge, the Sphinx's eyes fixed upon you as if gauging your worth. You step closer to the Sphinx's shoulder, brushing grit from your fingertips and wincing as the rough limestone rasping against your skin reminds you of that sand in your shoes feeling. Imagine standing before an immense block of stone, roughly 73 meters long, salvaged straight from the Giza Plateau's bedrock. Here, ancient masons used copper chisels and dolerite pounding stones to chip away at the lion's haunch, shaping it little by little under the relentless sun. You probably wouldn't sign up for that job on your own free will, no maternity leave. No hazard pay at these craftsmen set to work day after dusty day. You crouch, leaning against a fallen chisel, its metal head worn smooth as a river pebble. Picture a team of 1,000 laborers hauling limestone from the quarry at the plateau's edge, sliding blocks along wooden sledges lubricated with water and oil. The friction must have squeaked like a rusty hinge, the scent of wet sand mixing with the stink of human sweat, yet they pressed on, driven by royal decree and the promise of afterlife glory. Mainstream historians credit Pharaoh Kafir with ordering this beast into being around 2500 BC as a guardian for his pyramid complex, a bedfellow for his tomb in the cosmic journey beyond. You glide your hand over a half-finished groove where a mason's mallet slipped, leaving a shallow scar in the stone. Historians still argue whether these errors were patched with plaster or simply left as ghostly fingerprints of the past. As your eyes follow the rough line, you imagine the mason muscles, straining, heart pounding, sweeping away stone chips that clinked like rain on metal buckets. You sense the rhythm of those blows, the unrelenting beat of human ambition echoing across millennia. A faint breeze carries the aroma of date palms from a distant oasis. And you wonder if the workers paused now and then to chew on sweet fruit, or sip from skin gourds filled with beer, their only break in an unforgiving schedule. Then there's the curious detail no tour guide mentions. Some fringe researchers speculate that the limestone used here was once softer, a peculiar kind of sedimentary cheese-like rock that hardened only after carving, thanks to a secret alchemical process now lost. You smirk, but the idea lodges into your brain like a seed, sprouting visions of ancient Egyptian chemists, tinkering with secret recipes in hidden workshops. You run a finger along the boundary where harder bedrock meets softer fill, noting the slight color change from honey gold to chalky white. That variation required the masons to adjust their tools, constantly sharpening copper chisels on sandstone grinding stones, swapping two heavier pounding stones for tougher sections. You grip a wooden haft, once bound to a bronze blade, still faintly warm from the sun. Imagine the shock of that first strike, the sparkle of crushed crystal under hammer blows. You frown at the thought of the blistered palms and whoops of effort echoing off the plateau's walls. Lean in closer, and you hear echoing whispers, rumors of secret teams carving hidden chambers beneath the statue, slipping in at night with lanterns and measuring rods. Fringe tales say these crews worked in shadows, planning pathways for pharaohs to traverse unseen into the underworld. You feel a shiver in the air, as if those clandestine corridors still exist, waiting like coiled snakes beneath the giant paws. Historians still argue whether any such passages were ever intended by the original builders or simply dug later by treasure hunters hopeful for gold. You trace the contour of a massive flake where a chunk of stone fell centuries ago, revealing primordial layers of sediment. That collapse may have triggered the earliest Sphinx restoration under Thutmose IV, who claims in his dream Stele that he dreamed the Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared away the sand. You pause, amused at the idea of a half-buried statue giving royal pep talks. Imagine an overworked pharaoh hearing, "Clean me up and I'll make you a big shot." It's goofy, but then again, absolute power does weird things to your brain. In the distance, you catch sight of scaffolding remnants from Napoleon's early surveys. Rusty iron rods that look like giant metallic centipedes draped against the Sphinx's flank. Western explorers in the 18th and 19th centuries used plaster and masonry to prop up weakened areas, sometimes causing more harm than good. You wince at the laughable irony, well-meaning repairs that etched new scars into an already weathered face. The desert wind whispers through those iron skeletons, conjuring images of helmeted engineers in pith helmets, scribbling notes by lantern light. Your gaze shifts upward to the faint outline of the headdress. The Nez cloth carved into stone. Stripes radiating from the crown like a solar fan. You tap lightly on one of the stripes, listening for a hollow sound that might indicate a hidden cavity. Scholars still debate whether those grooves served a functional role, perhaps channeling. Rainwater away were purely decorative, intended to mimic the textile folds of royal garb. You imagine the original artisan leaning close to inspect symmetry, squinting as the desert glare played tricks on his eyes. A winged scarab beetle trundles across the stone at your feet, antennae wiggling like twin tuning forks. In Egyptian lore, the scarab rolled the sun across the sky, symbolizing rebirth. You chuckle, wondering if a stray bug once inspired the Sphinx's sculptor, an everyday insect offering cosmic guidance. It's a small reminder that even monumental feats of stone grew from simple observations of the natural world. You lean your forehead against the warm limestone, feeling your pulse sync with the desert heat, the echo of countless hammers, and the silent prayers of pyramids rising behind you. The Sphinx's body holds traces of every chisel strike, every slip of a tool, every challenge overcome by human will. You breathe in that legacy of sweat and grit, a visceral connection to masons who dreamed of eternity as they toiled under this same sun. As you straighten up, sand trickles from your hair and you shake your head, scattering grains like fallen memories. A quiet grin plays on your lips, seen the rough sketches of its creation, felt the palpable presence of the craftsman who shaped a legend. Yet the deeper question remains. Why carve a mythical beast here, at the edge of civilization, staring east toward the rising sun? The answer drifts through scholarly debates. Some say it marked the horizon for celestial rituals. Others claim it embodied the pharaoh's divine power. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx was part of Khafre's grand plan from day one, or if it began as something else entirely. It's repurposed over time to suit evolving religious needs. You step back into the widening ring of rubble at the statues. Bays, the landscape suddenly feeling more alive with possibility than before. Each chiseled line seems to pulse under the sun, carrying whispers of ambition, reverence, and stubborn human pride. You tuck your hands into the pockets of your coat, though. No coat can protect you from this desert's embrace, and prepare for the next descent into hidden passages beneath these monumental paws. Your heartbeat sinks with the desert wind as you crouch by the Sphinx's massive paw, running your fingers along the uneven limestone. Remember that narrow gap you spotted at dawn? Now you're here, tracing the neat rows of brickwork that fill a once grand gateway. This entrance, discovered by Colonel Howard Vyse in 1818, was originally hidden beneath tons of shifting sand he blasted through with gunpowder and a healthy dose of imperial impatience. You wince at the explosion echoing in your mind. Grateful you opted for a quieter discovery method. Gentle fingertip prods and a steady stream of salty sweat trickling down your spine. Your torchlight flickers against the shadowy recess, illuminating brick edges dusty with centuries of neglect. You tap a brick, and it rings with a hollow thunk, the perfect invitation to push. You brace your shoulder and shove. Dust erupts like a miniature sandstorm at your back, specks dancing in the torches. Glow. The corridor yawns before you, its ceiling low enough that you must stoop, the walls narrowing to a claustrophobic width. You can taste the stale air, thick with centuries of silence. Ha! And you inhale deeply, slightly regretting the decision when phlegm tickles your throat. Footsteps echo softly as you step in, and your shadow stretches long across the mosaic of sandstone. Blocks, here and there, smudges of red ochre mark what might have been ritual paint, now faded into inconspicuous stains. You lean close, almost smelling a hint of incense, burnt long ago clove, and myrrh, mingling with damp stone. It's intimate in here, like being pressed against a stranger on public transport. But infinitely more mysterious. Midway through the passage, you pause by a T-junction. To the left, rock walls bear faint hieroglyphs, perhaps graffiti left by T-Kotra, medieval treasure hunters hoping for a pharaoh's stash. Fringe theorists claim these scribbles point to an inner sanctum shaped like a lotus blossom. A secret chamber designed for Atlantean emissaries to confer with Egyptian high priests. You chuckle at the image. Atlanteans in togas, exchanging pleasantries with priests in kilts, history's oddest bridging of fashion eras. Still, you can't deny the allure of hidden rooms filled with otherworldly tech. You venture right instead. Stepping over a short threshold into a squat antechamber. Your torch flicks across the floor to reveal a series of shallow depressions, perfectly spaced ruts carved into solid rock. Could they have held wooden beams supporting a flat roof, long since collapsed? Or were they part of a cosmic alignment? Ritual, where priests rolled consecrated spheres along the grooves to mark celestial events. Historians still argue whether these subterranean spaces served practical storage purposes or more esoteric ceremonial functions. A faint breeze seeps from a crack overhead. Stirring your hair and goosebumps on your arms, you hover beneath a brick arch that sags ominously, as if groaning under its ancient burden. You grip the rough edge of the lintel, marble dust flecks, decorating your fingertips like bizarre confetti. The air here is cooler, carrying a subtle scent of wet earth and something metallic. That hint of iron tang sends a mild jolt through you, reminding you of tomb raiders with torches and rusty swords creeping through these caves centuries ago. You step deeper, mindful of shifting rubble underfoot. The walls narrow, the ceiling lowers again, and you're forced to inch forward like a snail inching along a garden path. Except this path is hewn from living rock. Tiny clumps of sand fall from loose bricks overhead, plinking softly against your boots. Somewhere behind you, a bat flitters, its wings brushing the corridor walls. Rustling like ancient paper turning pages of a forbidden tome. At last, you reach the end. A sealed stone block engraved with two symmetrical eye motifs, their pupils staring into infinity. Could this block be a key to another portal? You press your palm against one eye, half expecting it to shift like a doorknob. Instead, your hand warms against cool granite, leaving a transient smear of sweat. You step back, weighing your options. Break the seal and risk collapse, or respect the ancient boundary. You sigh, knowing that some secrets guard themselves jealously. A rogue breeze rattles loose bricks, sending a rain of powdery sand onto your torch. You wave your free hand to clear it, the grains cascading like glitter under moonlight. Exhilarating and mildly terrifying, like standing at the edge of a roller coaster before the drop. You remind yourself of that reassuring thought. Even if you do trigger a collapse, you'll have an epic story for your next live stream. It's complete with dramatic screams and shaky camera angles. In the dim glow, you spot another riddle scrawled in soot above the sealed block. The script isn't hieroglyphic, but a later hand aerobic letters spelling out something like, "Beware the silent guardian." Spine tingling, but you definitely shrieked silently at that. Or are these warnings? Left by Sufi pilgrims, or just some prankster scribble from the Ottoman era? Scholars still argue whether medieval visitors respected the site's sanctity or defaced it with irreverent doodles. You settle on leaving the block untouched. After all, enigmatic seals are more thrilling when they stay sealed. You turn to retrace your steps, feeling the corridor's cool embrace give way to warmer air as you near the entrance. You half expect a spectral voice to whisper, "Come back," but instead you hear your own lungs, booming with anticipation for what lies above. Exiting through the bricked-in doorway, you brush grit from your clothes, smearing sand across your legs like abstract body art. Sunlight slashes through the gap. Stark against the corridors, glum your ticket back to open air and the Sphinx's watchful visage. As you stand upright, blinking against the light, you can't help but smile at the thought that beneath these paws, there could still be untouched chambers waiting to be discovered. You pat the Sphinx's paw, affectionately assuming it won't mind your climbing ambitions and step back into the desert's roar. The roar is mostly your imagination, but it sounds legit in the quiet vastness. Ahead, the Sphinx stands silent, its body disguising labyrinthine secrets, and you, with your torch and curiosity, ready for more. You step back from the Sphinx, brushing a stray tuft of sand from your jacket sleeve as the sun climbs higher. The heat drinks in every ounce of moisture, and you can practically feel sweat pooling at the small of your back. Imagine the ancient engineers here, more than 4.5 millennia ago, sweating under the same unrelenting sun as they devised a way to carve 73 meters of limestone directly from the plateau's bedrock. This wasn't just whacking away with chisels. It was a feat of project management, workforce coordination, and sheer, unfiltered human stubbornness. You crouch down and scoop up a handful of sand, letting it spill slowly through your fingers, the grains crackling like a soft applause. In your mind's eye, you see copper chisels glinting in torchlight, dolerite pounding stones the size of large watermelons swinging against living rock. There's an unmistakable rhythm to those blows. The click-clack of mallet on stone echoing across the desert plain. Mainstream archaeologists agree the Sphinx was carved around 2500 BC, likely under Pharaoh Khafre's orders, using nothing more than copper tools hardened in the Nile's mud-no steel. It's no power tools, just raw determination and heft. You rise, dusting your palms on your jeans, and imagine the ramp systems these teams built. Straight ramps, zigzagging ramps, circular ramps snaking around the monument. Historians still argue whether ramps ran directly up to the cutting face or curled in spirals like a giant snail shell. You smile at the image of overworked masons, hauling blocks up a corkscrew ramp, feeling like hamsters on a wheel. Only with more sand in their boots and less overhead lighting. A gentle breeze stirs the outer layers of your hair, and you notice a line of broken bricks forming a faint trace of a possible service ramp footpath. Perhaps they laid wooden sledges along this route, pouring water on the sand to reduce friction in a simple yet brilliant trick. Fringe theorists speak of even wilder methods. Some claim Egyptians mixed in animal fats, or more bizarrely, camel urine to create a lubricating paste that could have the drag on heavy stones. You raise an eyebrow. Camel pee-powered sledges. That's one way to keep workers motivated, you think? But you suspect it's one barroom legend too far. You lean forward, tapping your fingers on what might be a stone anchor point, imagining a network of ropes and pulleys anchored to wooden posts hammered into the earth. You picture teams of 50 men pulling in unison, their chants rising in rough harmony as they synchronized each jerk to coax massive chunks of limestone into place. It must have sounded like a low chant at a football match, only with more grunt. You chuckle softly at the thought of a foreman shouting, "Keep it steady, Ahmed." Don't drop the dashboard we call the Sphinx nose. The desert air ripples overhead, and you inhale deeply, tasting dry saltiness mixed with heat. You imagine the foreman tracking progress on simple reed paper blueprints, marking every completed level, data-driven, but with sand instead of spreadsheets. Historians still argue whether the workforce was composed of seasonal conscripts or well-paid artisans who saw it as a career milestone. You like to picture them as proud craftspeople, not slaves, though the empire's harsh edges always complicate. That ideal. You shift your weight to rest on one knee, noticing faint tool marks in parallel lines, evidence of planing stones dragged across the surface to smooth the weathered facade. The grooves run in unison, like grooves on an old vinyl, record hinting at an unspoken rhythm in the sculptor's process. You can almost hear it. Thunk, thunk. A methodical cadence under flickering torchlight as teams moved from one section to the next. Suddenly, a rogue breeze picks up a swirl of sand dancing around your ankles, and you spot something odd. A shallow trench cutting at an angle just beyond the Sphinx's hindquarters. Could this have been part of a drainage system to channel rainwater away from the statue's foundations? Or a leftover scar from earlier excavation attempts? Fringe architects insist these trenches once housed complex wooden scaffolds, assembled around the Sphinx like scaffolding on a skyscraper. You grinned at the image giant wooden gurneys clinging to stone. Like barnacles, while historians still argue whether any permanent scaffolding was used at all, or if everything was built, torn down, and recycled by the next shift. You stand, stretching your legs, and feel the desert floor shift beneath your feet. The station wagon tour groups might scoff at this close scrutiny, but you prefer to immerse yourself. You imagine the engineers testing out different stone types, swapping soft yellow limestone nearer the surface for harder, more durable layers deeper down. They'd chisel away the outer coating until the heart of the rock revealed a new face. Almost like reverse sculpting, excavate the flaws until the good stuff shows up. It's a geological treasure hunt conducted by brute force. A distant vulture circles high above, silhouette a dark smudge against the bright sky. You wave at it, half expecting it to swoop down and join your project management meeting. You stand alone, really. One torchlit session under the Sphinx. Mind buzzing with diagrams of ramps, crisscrossing like steel skeletons you'll never see. Yet those sketches live on in millennia-old reliefs and papyrus fragments, sort of like ancient blueprints. If you squint and ignore the missing pages, you pause at the base of the statue, pressing your palm to the cool limestone. You feel the subtle concavity where craftsmen used large bush hammers to rough out the Sphinx's form, creating a faceted surface that other artisans later planed smooth. That layering of technique from rough hewing to fine finishing you recognize as the same method modern stonemasons use, proof that some ideas really are timeless. In your pocket, your phone vibrates with a notification. Time to hydrate. You glance at the screen. 9:47 a.m. Giza local time and stash. The device back. It's ironic. Ancient workers had no digital reminders, yet they kept precise records on astrakhan shards. You pull out a canteen, take a sip, and let the cold water soothe your parched throat. You recall a fringe rumor that those workers drank a barley beer blend fortified with herbs to ease muscle cramps, basically the ancient equivalent of energy drinks. You nod, sort of wishful they'd had a taste of modern sports nutrition. The Sphinx watches you, silent and unblinking. You can almost see its stone ears perched behind the missing nose, straining to catch the faint echoes of hammer strikes long since quieted. The sculptor who planned the slope of its shoulders must have coordinated perfectly with fellow artisans carving the face. ensuring the statue's proportions aligned under the harsh Egyptian sun. It's staggering. A single cohesive vision executed at monumental scale without digital modeling or 3D simulations. You laugh softly at your own awe. Sure, you've seen computer reconstructions of pharaonic era toolkits, but nothing beats the grainy thrill of standing in front of it and pondering the mechanics in real time. You brush sand off your palm, offering it up in an imaginary slow clap for the ancient workforce. They hauled stone, lifted girders, tracked equations in the sky, somehow left you standing here wondering whether they were masons or magicians. Your feet shift and you drift toward the next marvel. The ramps leading to the Pyramid of Kafir, skirting the Sphinx's flank. From here, you can trace a faint zigzag path carved into the rock face, evidence of ancient root finding that probably gave those workers cramps of a different kind. You step along the line, toes crunching on fractured stone, and a light joke pops out. I bet they'd invented complaining to the manager software if they could. But as the heat intensifies, you recognize a broader lesson in all this. Human ingenuity knows no season. It's ramps, pulleys, chisels, sweat, they're the toolbox of every era. Whether you're hauling limestone in 2500 BC or running a crowdfunding campaign today, it all comes down to clever hacks, stubborn persistence, and a weird willingness to wear sand in every nook of your life. You pause at the final step of the ramp. It's looking back at the Sphinx's stoic silhouette. You can almost hear the ghostly echo of a chant. Lift, decay, and shift, and carve. Then the desert swallows the sound as the wind shifts. You pat your canteen, slinging it back onto your hip. It's time to move on, to peel back more layers of this ancient engineering marvel. But before you go, take a moment, maybe share this wild ramp theory in the chat's top comments, or tweet at your best bud who's obsessed with construction conspiracies. After all, nobody can resist a good ramp debate under the desert sun. You duck beneath the Sphinx's chin, crouching as the floor tilts down into a narrow shaft that seems barely wide enough for your shoulders. The limestone walls press close, slick and cool beneath your fingertips, carrying the faint echo of every footstep you've ever taken. Your torchlight quivers, sending jittery shadows dancing along the carved surfaces. In the 1920s, Emile Barais cleared away centuries of accumulated sand and rubble to expose these subterranean passages, hoping to reveal hidden chambers beneath the statue's belly. Mainstream archaeology credits his work with finally mapping out the primary tunnel system here. Although only a few small recesses proved accessible, you shuffle forward, and every inhale draws in that musty earth hollow scent like the inside of a long-forgotten library that's been closed for 1,000 years. You taste chalky dust on your tongue, gritty and strange, as if the stone itself has secrets to whisper. You press your palm to the curved wall at shoulder height, feeling minute grooves from ancient tool marks, each nick representing a mason's prayer for safe passage into the underworld. Historians still argue whether these shafts were part of the original Sphinx design or the result of later excavations, perhaps carved centuries after Kafir to store ritual objects or hide treasure from tomb robbers. A bead of sweat trickles down your temple, catching the torchlight like a tiny comet before it splashes onto the stone. Your knees creak as you advance, and somewhere above, the Sphinx's massive head broods over you. The passage slopes downhill at a gentle angle, leading you into deeper gloom. Here, the walls narrow again, forcing you to tilt your shoulders and shuffle as if you're wading through a human-sized straw. You can't help picturing fringe stories about Atlantean engineers installing crystal conduits along these walls, channeling mystical energies beneath the statue. You smirk at the thought crystals in Giza Yet there's something deliciously tempting in that fantasy. A hidden power source awaiting activation. Midway in, you come across a small alcove carved into the northern wall. It's barely large enough for you to step into, and you duck your head to peer inside. The alcove's floor is littered with ancient shards, bits of pottery, fragments of alabaster offering bowls, and a single broken piece of red jasper that gleams oddly in the flickering light. Could priests have used this chamber for miniature libations, pouring wine and milk on the rock to consecrate the Sphinx's underbelly? Or was it simply a makeshift cache for tools and lamps during the 26th dynasty restorations? Historians still argue whether these niche spaces served ceremonial functions or mundane storage needs. You squeeze past the alcove, brushing your arm against sharp limestone edges. The tunnel curves, and you pause as the air shifts, growing damp and metallic. You inhale deeply, detecting iron's faint tang, as though old metal hinges or fittings once clung to the walls. Fringe researchers swear that hidden doors bristling with bronze bolts once guarded an inner sanctum, some say a fabled hall of records rumored to contain papyrus scrolls from Atlantis itself. You stifle a giggle at the notion, but you can't quite dismiss it. Tiny sparks of possibility shimmer in the air just beyond reach. Your torchlight flares against a low-hanging lintel. Hey, and you duck again to avoid banging your head. Underfoot, the limestone floor dips to form a shallow basin, as if carved to capture dripping water. You stoop to run your fingers along the channel that leads away from the basin, imagining it once funneled precious moisture out of these passages, preventing long-term deterioration. Without such rudimentary drainage, centuries of salt-laden desert humidity might have turned this sandstone into nothing more than powder. Yet some fringe voices claim those channels were actually designed to carry sacred oils used in nighttime rituals, blood red. Mixtures of rosemary and myrrh dripped onto the floor to awaken subterranean guardians. You shiver, catching your own echo, and remind yourself that your flashlight beam is your only company down here. Pressing on, you emerge into a second, slightly larger chamber. Your torch beam sweeps across the walls, revealing roughly chiseled benches carved directly from the living rock. You run a fingertip over one of the benches and imagine priests sitting here in dim lamplight, robes pooling on the floor as they murmured incantations to Khepri, the scarab god of rebirth. Could this have been an initiation chamber for high-ranking priests, conferring cosmic knowledge before they ascended to greater duties? Historians still argue whether any of these subterranean rooms were ever used for formal rites, or if they're the result of later devotees carving out niches in devotional fervor. A draft cools your neck, and you turn to see a narrow slit of light at the far end, bright as a single eye winking in the dark. You approach, heart thudding, and realize it's a tiny ventilation shaft allowing fresh air to feed into these spaces. You crouch and peer up. The shaft narrows further, disappearing into the Sphinx's midriff and beyond into unknown heights. That moment of connection between the breath you exhale and the air above the desert's unsettling. It's a visceral reminder that above these passages lies something vast and unreachable. A hidden world of stone and sunlight you can't access from below. Your torch flickers, and you pull back a few steps to examine another oddity: indentations on the floor, arranged in a precise grid pattern. Could they have served as sockets for wooden columns that supported a temporary ceiling? Or maybe they tracked placements for ceremonial statues, leaving space for votive offerings brought here under the cover of night. Fringe enthusiasts even propose these sockets cradled crystal obelisks, each tuned to a specific sonic frequency, lifting the Sphinx's lionheart vibrations to commune with the stars. You shake off the image as your torch sputters. It's the flame dancing dangerously close to extinction. You blow gently on the wick and steady the flame, peering back down the passage you came through. Every surface glints with mineral deposits. A mosaic of pale yellows and chalky whites that make you think of ancient cave paintings. You lean forward, brushing away a fine layer of dust to reveal a small, triangular symbol carved into the wall, 3 parallel lines intersecting a diagonal slash. It doesn't resemble any common hieroglyph. You wonder if it was a mason's mark, a secret signature left by a craftsman who never got credit in the official record. Historians still argue whether these etchings were purposeful tags or random graffiti from centuries of explorers. You tap your canteen against your hip, deciding it's time to head back before you lose your nerve in the inky blackness. Turning, you retrace your steps past the benches and alcoves, the mellow hum of your footfalls mingling with the tunnel's whispers. Every shadow seems to quiver, like a living presence watching you return from the depths. You pause at the bowl-shaped depression again, considering scooping up a handful of that stagnant dust and sprinkling it in your hair for authenticity. You laugh softly at the ridiculousness of that thought, though fringe vloggers might call it peak immersion. The shaft begins to pitch upward, and you straighten into a slow climb, shoulders brushing rough walls as you ascend. Grit crinkles under your boots, and each step feels more urgent, as if the passages themselves are urging you to return to daylight. You glance back once, expecting to see a geometric pattern glimmering in the gloom. But there's only darkness, impenetrable, silent. Indifferent, at last, you emerge where Barris's team first breached the underbelly, and the blast of sunlight steals your breath. Sand dances on the wind, and you squint as your eyes adjust from subterranean twilight to the desert's harsh glare. The Sphinx's paws loom above, unwinking and regal as ever. You stretch, letting your muscles unwind from the cramped crawl, and offer a nod of thanks to the silent beast for sparing you its hidden depths as you step away from the opening. The desert heat reclaims you, and you feel an odd mixture of relief and longing. Those chambers beneath the Sphinx, they're mute. Stories, their half-glimpsed symbols, linger in your mind like unfinished dreams. You tuck your torch back into your pack, pat the Sphinx's flank gently, and turn your gaze toward the pyramids glinting in the afternoon sun. The desert is vast, its secrets infinite, and you, torch in hand, are just beginning to uncover them. You circle the Sphinx, letting your fingertips glide over the weathered stone as the desert breeze tousles your hair. You pause at the broad haunch where lion musculature meets human poise, tracing the curve that once conveyed raw power tail, curled just so, like the curl of a barbell in a gym selfie. It's a masterclass in symbolism, the ferocity of a lion fused with the intellect of a king. Mainstream scholars agree the Sphinx embodies the pharaoh Kafir, merging royal visage with leonine strength to guard his pyramid complex. Yet, here you stand, scrutinizing each carved line as if trying to decode an ancient emoji. Heat radiates from the stone, carrying a faint aroma of sun-baked limestone and something like incense that lingers from centuries-old rituals. You breathe it in deeply, savoring the dry warmth that coats your nostrils. The Sphinx's headdress, the striped Nennis cloth, glistens in high relief, stripes radiating like solar rays baked into the rock. You imagine it once gleamed under a layer of gold leaf, gleaming brighter than any modern smartphone screen. Fringe theorists whisper that the headdress contained secret, metaphysical formulae encoded in the stripe patterns, allowing the statue to channel cosmic energy at solstices. You chuckle cosmic Wi-Fi, powered by stone, but can't help picturing the Sphinx sending tweets to Orion, leaning close. You note the remnants of a ceremonial beard carved below the chin. That false beard, once affixed with bitumen and gold plating, was a symbol of divine kingship, linking Pharaoh to the gods. Its fragments now lie scattered in the British Museum and Cairo's Egyptian Antiquities Museum. like missing puzzle pieces in a cosmic jigsaw. You tap the spot on the stone where the beard once joined, feeling a subtle dip in the surface. You probably wouldn't trust an adhesive more primitive than toothpaste to hold that thing on. But evidently, it did the job for centuries. Your eyes drift upward to the eyes themselves, mun-shaped, staring eastward toward the sunrise. Some say those eyes were designed to catch the first light and beam it back like a cosmic mirror, reflecting solar power during dawn ceremonies. You recall earlier speculations about solstice alignments, noticing how the early morning shadow slides across the right eye just so. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx's gaze was meant to track the sun's journey or act as an astronomical calendar for Egyptian priests. You nod, appreciating that even a stone statue can spark midnight deadlines in academic journals. You step back and consider the torso's cross-section. Broad chest narrowing into a sleek waist, an anatomical finesse that makes the statue look more buff than most personal trainers you've met. There's a tactile poetry in those lines, strong enough to intimidate hyenas, wise enough to inspire scribes. Fringe occult enthusiasts claim the Sphinx's torso once housed a hidden chamber, filled with sacred texts, indexed by hieroglyphs mapped directly onto the stone's muscles. You grin at the thought of a bicep-bound library inside this stone leviathan. But admit it's delightfully kooky. The desert sun bakes the stone until it almost flickers. And you find shade beneath the Sphinx's belly, recalling the narrow underbelly. Tunnels you just scuttled through. You pat the limestone thoughtfully, remembering cramped passages and mysterious symbols. Now you're back in the open air, meditating on dualities. Hidden versus visible. Human versus beast. Practical guard versus mystical portal. In some relief fragments nearby, falcon-headed gods stand flanking the Sphinx, linking it to Horus and suggesting a divine guardianship over the necropolis. You inhale the dry air, savoring its timeless flavor. As you trace the boundary where lion's mane morphs into Pharaoh's headdress, you crack a wry smile at the sculptor's audacity. Without modern measuring tools or 3D modeling, they nailed proportions better than your home's IKEA furniture instructions. You tap on the shoulder's nodule, the faint reverberation reminding you of a distant gong. Can almost hear temple priests chanting, "May the Sphinx stand firm against tomb robbers and bad puns." The very idea feels comforting in a corner of your mind. Your gaze drifts to faint red ochre traces still clinging in crevices. Vestiges of original paint that once brought the statue to vibrant life. Imagine a polychrome Sphinx, its fur painted tawny brown, face tinted pink, eyes ringed in coal black. It would have been like meeting a lion in full makeup, a creature both elegant and unnerving. You make a mental note to explain to the tour group that Egyptians were basically ancient beauty influencers, layering on kohl and pigments centuries before TikTok tutorials existed. A sudden gust sweeps sand against your ankles, whispering up through the snarled paws. You bend down, gathering a pinch of dust, then let it slip through your fingers like sand in shoes all over again. That recurrent itch reminds you of earlier sections, your relentless companion on this journey. You shake your foot, lightly sentimental. Really, and continue your exploration. The Sphinx's broad back curves into haunches that flow like sculpted fabric, conveying both dynamism and stoicism. You press your cheek against the cool rock, as if hoping to feel an echo of the sculptor's heartbeat. It's a contact sport of history, skin to stone, present to past. You recall stories that priests draped the Sphinx in ceremonial cloths during festivals, dressing it like a living god. Historians still argue whether these textiles covered the statue year-round or only during specific rites. But the image of a stone lion donning regal linens feels delightfully surreal. Astray. Lizard scuttles across your knee, pausing as if to acknowledge your presence. You laugh softly. It's the smallest guardian this side of the Nile. The desert ecosystem weaves around this monument, a reminder that life endures amidst ruins. You tuck that micro-encounter into your memory bank, anticipating a comment like, "He made friends with a basilisk under the Sphinx." That would certainly rack up likes. You step back to take in the entire form one more time. Leonine shoulders. Human intellect. Solar symbolism wrapped in stone. You stretch out your arms, hugging the air as though you could embrace the whole entity, which, at 73 meters long, would be a massive hug even for a circus strongman. You shake your head, half joking that even your most ambitious yoga stretch couldn't match this. Behind you, the pyramids gleam under the sun, a geometric congregation presided over by this singular blend of myth and monarchy. The desert around them feels hushed, like an audience holding its breath for the Sphinx's next move, if it ever moves at all. You smirk at the dramatic image. Movements so slow, you'd need a time-lapse camera lasting millennia to catch a head tilt. You pocket a few grains of sand as a quirky souvenir mug. Just memory fuel for your next live stream. You remind yourself to mention the layering of symbolism. Power, wisdom, guardianship, solar worship. Those layers overlap like geological strata, each revealing deeper complexity the closer you look. And like a good conspiracy theory, once you glimpse one layer, you start Googling about secret levels beneath it, before you wander off to the next scene. You offer one more nod to the Sphinx's emblematic Stansleyan heart, human mind forever, frozen in stone. It's a partnership between animal instinct and crafted reason, reminding you that the greatest monuments blend brute force with creative vision. You nudge your gaze eastward as dawn approaches, feeling the desert air grow taut with expectation. The Great Sphinx faces almost due east, its stone eyes locked on the horizon where the sun will soon emerge. This deliberate orientation carved during the 4th dynasty around 2500 BC. It's a mainstream fact that ties the Sphinx to ancient solar worship and the daily rebirth of Ra. You inhale the cool, pre-dawn breeze, tasting the faint tang of ozone that precedes daylight, and shiver with anticipation as you imagine the first sliver of sun striking that stoic face, as the sky brightens from inky blue to pale gold. You squint through the haze, watching a slender ray pierce the Sphinx's left eye socket. The beam slides down the cheek, kissing the weathered lip before slipping off at the jawline like a shy guest at a masquerade ball. It's deliciously cinematic, and you can't help but crack a soft joke. Take that. Paparazzi no flash needed. You lean closer, letting the light dance across carved furrows and smoothing over half-obliterated details, highlighting the sculptor's once crisp chisel marks and ephemeral paint residues. You recall that the solstitial alignment is no accident. On the summer solstice around June 21st, the sun rises slightly northeast, but by winter solstice around December 21st, Tet climbs from a point southeast. The Sphinx's broad face captures a dynamic play of light and shadow across these extremes, creating ephemeral patterns priests may have read like cosmic tea leaves. Historians still argue whether these shifting sunbeams were ritual timekeepers for annual festivals or simply aesthetic flourishes meant to awe onlookers. You squint at the warm glow sliding toward the nose's remains and muse that whoever planned this must have had a rock-solid grasp of solar cycles. No smartphone app? Required. A cool breeze stirs, rustling the hem of your shirt as you stand at the Sphinx's base. Small grains of sand whirl around your ankles and shimmer like golden confetti, greeting the dawn like a troupe of tiny acrobats. You glance at your watch, 6:02 a.m. Giza, time, and marvel that ancient astronomers, armed only with horizon markers and water clocks, tracked solstices with surprising precision. Imagine them lying on their backs upon flat stone slabs behind the Sphinx, necks craned, charting sunrise points year after year. Recording data on papyrus while camels chewed cud nearby. You chuckle. Bet they had better forecasting than my weather app above you. The Nennis headdress captures the early light in parallel stripes. It's acting like a series of reflective channels that funnel illumination onto the face. Fringe theorists love to spin this into cosmic Wi-Fi lore, claim that angled grooves served as light conductors, amplifying solar power into hidden chambers within. You raise an eyebrow at the suggestion of stone solar concentrators, but can't deny the visual poetry of channeled gold rays slicing across millennial stone. Maybe, you think, the Sphinx was the world's first solar panel. Just without the carbon footprint, your shadow stretches long behind you. A silhouette that merges with the Sphinx's carved form. In that moment, you feel connected across a Giza, living echo of ancient ritualists who rose before dawn to greet Ra's ascent. You inhale again, the scent of cool sand and warming stone mingling like a desert incense. You remind yourself that these architects didn't need high-precision instruments to achieve remarkable alignment. No. They relied on observation, persistence, and uncanny spatial intuition. You smile at the thought that sometimes low-tech solutions trump any gadget you carry. Between your feet, you spot a faint groove cut into the stone platform channel that runs perpendicular to the Sphinx's gaze. Could this have been a sightline marker, placed there so priests could position ceremonial plinths directly in the sun's path during equinox festivals? Or was it a spillage trench intended to catch dripping libations poured by devout worshippers? Historians still argue whether these channels served astronomical or purely practical functions, debating in hushed tones about whether this line marks sunrise on equinox or simply diverts rainwater as the sun fully clears the horizon. The Sphinx's face glows in warm hues, and you laugh softly at your own internal monologue. Morning routine achieved, no snooze button needed. You lean against one of the massive paws, feeling the stone's heat seep into your jeans. The warmth is comforting, like a giant igloo heated by cosmic intent. You reach out and trace the scratch where someone once carved the date 1912. In Roman numerals, an experiment in human narcissism that still, somehow, catches a sliver of dawn light. A low hum vibrates through the ground, likely nothing more than distant traffic on the nearby highway. But in the hush of sunrise, it feels portentous. You imagine the Sphinx's ribs trembling as light ignites each carved groove, almost like the low note of a cosmic chant. Fringe enthusiasts might call it the solar hum, a subtle shifting of thermal layers inside the stone, releasing ancient vibrations. You smile at that fantastical notion and tap the paw. Sure, play me that desert mixtape. You step back, taking in the whole spectacle. A silent stone sentinel greeting each dawn with steadfast loyalty. Your shirt clings damply across your back, and you can taste the adrenaline of witnessing this daily rebirth. In the pyramid fields beyond, the three great pyramids catch the glow. Their triangular silhouettes standing like the audience to the Sphinx's starring role. You lean forward, letting the sun's warmth fill your chest, and draw a quick mental sketch of how the light moves across the sculpture's features. You picture marking those key points on papyrus grids: left eye, right jaw, top of the head spread, each illumination event a checkpoint in a grand celestial timetable. It's a reminder that our ancestors were both dreamers and data collectors, bridging art and science in equal measure. As the sun climbs higher, shadow retreats from the face's central ridge, and you squint at the line where nose once jutted. Imagine if you could invent a time-lapse camera spanning 5,000 years. Every sunrise would record changes in erosion patterns, weather variations, and even restoration attempts. You chuckle at the absurdity. Netflix marathon of desert. Weathering, coming soon. Distracted by that thought, you almost miss a sliver of sunlight creeping into a shallow niche near the statue's chest. You step closer, realizing it's just a random beam, but you can't help feeling its momentary significance. Were priests here toasting offerings in that spot, letting morning rays bless their gifts? Historians still argue whether daily rituals, centered on the Sphinx, incorporated such solar choreography or occurred in nearby temples instead. You brush your palm over the warm stone one more time, feeling the desert's pulse beneath your skin. That momentary dance of dawn light feels like a conversation, an unspoken greeting between stone and sun. You grin at the intimacy of it and lean your ear close to the statue's base, half listening for a whisper, "Good morning, traveler." Instead, you hear the soft sigh of wind through sand, a lullaby older than any song on earth. The sun's glow now fully bathes the monument, and shadow recedes to reveal every scar, nick, and chisel groove in sharp relief. You shade your eyes and take a step back, to your own elongated shadow reaching to touch the Sphinx's. It feels momentous, as though you're part of a timeless ritual. Sunrise, shadow worship. Repeat with your phone out too, promised a sunrise. Pick you snap a quick shot, capturing the glowing visage and your own silhouette. You smirk, imagining the caption, "Me and my BFF raw." Then you tuck your phone away and stretch, savoring that post-sunrise high. You give one last nod to the Sphinx's stone lips, frozen in a serene, inscrutable expression, and whisper, "Thanks for the wake-up call." The desert heat ramps up, promising another scorching day, but you feel invigorated. Part of a lineage of dawn watchers stretching back to the dawn of time itself. It's more than a photo op. It's a living link to ancient astronomers who bent their backs to the desert sand for a glimpse of cosmic truth. You lift your backpack and step away, the pyramids towering behind you as silent witnesses. Each morning, the Sphinx greets Ra anew, and each time you'll hear that solar ballet as fresh as if for the first time. Night drapes the plateau in silvery shadow as you slip past the Sphinx's paws toward the nearby Sphinx temple, its columns bathed in the soft glow of a gilded moon. The air tastes of cool limestone and crushed natron, lingering like the aftertaste of a cleansing ritual. You step over sand-swept thresholds carved into the rock, each worn sill whispering of countless barefoot priests who padded here to invoke solar deities under moonlight. Mainstream archaeology identifies this temple as part of Pharaoh Khafu's complex, serving as a sacred space where offerings were presented to sustain his Ka in the afterlife. Your torch rests unused. You rely instead on that ghostly lunar glow to guide you past hieroglyph-lined walls. Silver light spills over bas-relief scenes, seated gods accepting platters of cakes, jackal-headed Anubis weighing souls on feather-tipped scales, and Raharkti rising on a papyrus bark barge, heeling close to a carved lotus column, fingertips tracing the faded grooves of painted petals. Scribed prayers curve above your hand, a litany, calling on the sun's twin aspects, life-giving warmth by day, and metaphysical rebirth by night. Historians still argue whether these nocturnal rites were primarily funeral offerings or part of an annual festival synchronized with the moon's cycles. A faint breeze stirs the temple's open arcade, carrying echoes of long-ago chant-soft, sinuous syllables that might have been intoned to coax the Sphinx's protective spirit awake. You imagine a circle of white-robed priests, their sandals stashed at the entrance, waving censers filled with myrrh and cinnamon. The smoke drifts in silver tendrils across the stone floor, curling like slow-motion dancers practicing a solemn ballet. You can almost feel the ash dusting your eyelashes. though you haven't actually lit a charcoal yet. It's like having invisible incense buddies join you for a low-key study session as you wander deeper. You find an offering niche carved into a sidewall. It holds a shallow basin once filled with Nile water, now cracked with age. You dip a fingertip into the cold stillness. Surprise jolts through you at that familiar chill which ripples through your bones like an unwelcome reminder of early morning dips in a modern plunge pool. Fringe scholars speculate that this basin was topped with quartz crystal platelets to refract moonbeams into a hidden cavern beneath the temple, channeling lunar energy into the earth. You snort at that image, a crystal nightlight in an ancient temple. It's as if some pharaoh had a cosmic nightlight on his wish list. You brush away a dribble of sand and notice faint ochre residues marking the floor around the basin. These pigments, once decorated ritual cakes offered to Min, the fertility god, symbolizing the promise of rebirth not just for the departed king, but for crops sprouting along the Nile's floodplain. The scent of stale grain seems to cling to the stone, and you close your eyes, inhaling deep enough to taste sour barley. You probably wouldn't post that to Instagram, but it's as real as it gets. Moving on, you reach the sanctuary's inner chamber, where the moonlight barely penetrates under a low lintel. Here, the floor is strewn with fragments of alabaster jars, their rims chipped and dusty. You kneel, cradling a shard between thumb and forefinger, imagining it once held oils scented with frankincense and lotus essence. Priests anointed the Sphinx's paws and the temple's threshold to consecrate the space, renewing its potency each lunar month. Historians still argue whether these rituals honored Kafir alone or tapped into a broader cult of Horus and the horizon-born sun god. Sudden rustle above you sends a flurry of moths spiraling into the air, their dusty wings brushing your cheeks like forgotten letters. You stifle a squeak, brushing off phantom flakes of wing powder as if they're confetti at a silent rave. You joke to yourself that at least these insects aren't stealing your drink. No, ancient fly swatters here. You press on, crouching beneath another ornate relief, showing the Sphinx flanked by falcon-winged deities. That protective motif makes you think of modern security cameras, only these guardians came with cosmic jurisdiction. No subscription required. Deep in the temple's heart sits a raised stone dais, its surface smoothed by generations of kneeling supplicants. In the moon-pooled silence, you imagine priests balancing bowls of natron and honey here, whispering chants to coax the Sphinx's animating spark into the world beyond stone. Fringe lore insists that on certain moon phases, this dais became a sonic amplifier, channeling the priest's humming vibrations through secret acoustic channels straight to the Sphinx's chest, wakening hidden chambers below. You grin at the idea of low-budget Stonehenge acoustics in Giza, though you can't resist humming a few notes yourself just to test the vibe. Your ear to the dais. You half expect an echo, but only hear the soft hiss of wind through column shafts. You lift yourself, brushing dust from your knees, and step into the temple's peristyle courtyard. The moon casts long silhouettes of broken pillars, turning them into ghostly columns of a cathedral that time forgot. You shuffle across cracked flagstones, careful not to trip over scattered pottery shards, each a relic of a vanished feast that priests once laid before their stone king. You pause at the courtyard center, where a shallow trough channels rainwater to a hidden reservoir. It's proof that these ritual spaces were as practically engineered as ceremonially charged. Some fringe commentators propose that those reservoirs collected purified water used to bathe the Sphinx itself during rare temple reopenings, anointing its missing nose with holy liquid for momentary restoration. You suppress a laugh at the image. Pharaohs in ceremonial swim trunks. It's overseeing a restoration spa for a stone lion, You take a slow spin, letting the moonlight wash over you and bounce off the temple's white limestone floor. The cool stone treads under your sandals like ice marble tiles in a luxury resort. Though this one's enrollment fee was measured in devotion and grain offerings, not credit card points. You tiptoe toward the temple entrance, passing an alcove, where faint graffiti in Greek letters spells out faded names of Hellenistic tourists. Historians still argue whether those travelers visited as genuine pilgrims or mere curiosity seekers marking their names like modern-day social media check-ins. Before you leave, press your palm to the front facade, feeling the vibration of stone settling under celestial watch. You tilt your head back, letting the moonlight splash across the carved Urias snake atop the portalit's raised hood, frozen in eternal vigilance. You breathe in that scent of ancient oil and burning resins one last time, preserving it in your memory like a sensory bookmark. Stepping out, you pause to look back at the temple's silhouette, its pillars standing like black notes against a silver staff. You see in your mind's eye the flicker of countless torches, the low hum of incantations reaching back into eternity. You shiver with delight, realizing you've just walked through a nexus of faith and craftsmanship, where practical design met profound mystery. And though the moonlit rituals have dimmed into legend, the temple still throbs with quiet stories waiting to be retold. You step away from the moonlit temple and head toward the vast expanse between the Sphinx and the pyramids, where moonlight still glints off scattered limestone debris. In the hush that follows your departure from subterranean hushes and lunar rituals, you remember the old Greek wanderer Herodotus, the father of history, who traipsed through Egypt around 450 BC, scribbling notes on parchments that would later shape Western imagination. He claimed the Sphinx was built by Chefornon. His telling, the Greek rendering of Keferiet, also wove in legends of an age before Egyptian memory. Mainstream scholars credit Herodotus's travelogues as the first written record of the Sphinx, detailing its enormous size and peculiar missing nose. As you walk, the desert sand crunches under your boots, and you imagine Herodotus striding here, toga billowing, quill in hand, startled by a camel snapping at his sandals. He wrote that the statue once wore a phoenix crest atop its head, lost to time, and that beneath the paws lay hidden oracles' tiny chambers through which priests delivered cryptic prophecies. You grin at the thought of oracles tucked beneath a lion's belly, issuing answers in mumbling whispers. Fringe theorists still claim Herodotus saw magical hieroglyphs that shifted when the moon was full, granting secret access codes to Egyptian temples, though no one has found those chameleon symbols in over 2 millennia. Historians still argue whether Herodotus conflated myth and fact or simply embellished his notes to entertain ravenous Greek audiences. You pause to kick a small rock toward the Sphinx's flank, watching it ricochet off eroded stone with a faint thud. It's a playful echo, reminiscent of Herodotus's own anecdote about the statue's body having bird-like feathers etched in stone days that modern experts dismiss as poetic license or faulty translation. Yet there's a charming fringe claim that early Greek travelers interpreted those supposed feather carvings as evidence of avian deities once worshipped here, drawing parallels to Hermes' winged sandals. You chuckle, picturing a half-lion, half-bird mashup stalking the desert, definitely a creature you wouldn't want to meet on a solo hike. Ahead, its battered pile of limestone blocks marks the spot where Greek engineers in Alexander's era may have attempted minor repairs. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great is said to have camped near the Sphinx, offering prayers to Ammon and lauding the statue's grandeur. If you imagine him, draped in lion skins to fit the scene, striking poses for his own entourage's painters. Fringe speculation suggests that Alexander once commissioned secret underground surveys here, hoping to find the legendary Hall of Records Herodotus hinted at. You smile at the chain of whispers Greek conquerors chasing Egyptian conspiracies. Long before reality TV made that a series premise, your gaze follows a faint trail of Greek graffiti scratched into the base letters barely legible, a spelling. Names like Pausanias or Philostratus. These signatures are tiny time capsules, proof that long before modern tourists, Hellenic pilgrims visited, scraped their identities into stone, and moved on. Mainstream archaeologists catalog these inscriptions as evidence of temple pilgrims' curiosity during the Ptolemaic era, when Greek and Egyptian cultures fused under dynastic rule. Yet, some fringe voices claim those engravings were actually census markers, used by priests to track temple attendants, forerunners of RSVP lists at divine dinner parties. You pause, and the breeze swirls around you, rustling the coarse fringe of your jacket. It reminds you of that corridor under the paw where you tasted fading incense and heard phantom bats. Now, under the open sky, you consider how Greek poets describe the Sphinx in their epics, a mysterious riddle giver perched on a hill outside Thebes, though that was a different Sphinx entirely. They borrowed the Egyptian guardian's name to dramatize their own myths, blending foreign stone with local legend. Historians still argue whether the Greek Sphinx myth influenced Egyptian cults, or if Egyptian priests adopted Greek narratives. To appeal to Hellenistic converts, a sand dune drifts like a silent wave at your side. And you recall reading that Greek travelers marveled at the sheer flatness of the plateau around the Sphinx, comparing it to a polished olive press. You wiggle your toes in the sand, picturing Herodotus making the same comparison, rehearsing it under Greek skies. Fringe lore elevates this to claim that ancient Greek architects used the Sphinx's base for early land surveying by measuring its shadows to calculate distances, centuries before Euclid penned his theorems. You chuckle at the idea of Pythagoras sneaking into Khufu's courtyard at midnight to test slope angles with a homemade protractor as dawn's first hint of color bleeds into the eastern sky. You stop to watch the limestone blink awake. The Sphinx's gaze shifts from stony indifference to warm recognition as the sun peaks over the horizon. You joke, hope he remembers me, though granite can't really recall faces. You feel the chill of your sanding breath in the air, a strange contrast to the sun-baked stone. And you consider that Greek astronomers likely timed their visits to catch sunrise here, proof that solar rituals weren't uniquely Egyptian. Historians still argue whether Greek visitors participated in sunrise ceremonies or merely observed as fascinated ethnographies. You kneel to inspect Greek minted coins scattered among the rubble, souvenirs dropped over centuries by pilgrims, hoping for divine favor. Some bear images of Zeus, others of Ptolemaic pharaohs with Greek names. You imagine a traveler flipping such a coin in his palm, weighing the gods of Olympus against the lion-headed power of Khufu's guardian. Fringe collectors assert that some coins were purposely deposited here as time capsules designed to outlast empires and speak to future generations. You pocket one, its edges soft as worn out prayers, and smile at the weight of history jingling in your jeans. A distant crow caws, and you glance back at the Sphinx's profile, noticing how Greek artists once replicated its visage on pottery vases, turning its profile into decorative motifs across the Mediterranean. You trace that profile in the air with your finger, mimicking a potter's wheel, an impromptu ASMR moment of swirling sand and shifting light. You whisper, "Spin me that vase, will ya?" Forgetting for a moment that there's no wheel here, only the desert's silent canvas. You stand, stretching stiff muscles, and wonder if Herodotus ever curled up to sleep beside the statue's paws, lulled by the desert's soft sighs after a day of note-taking. Fringe fantasy suggests he dreamt of lost Atlantean engineers teaching him secret carving methods, a revelation that vanished when he woke. You bite your lip to suppress a chuckle, but the image of Herodotus waking with chisel in hand makes you grin. Before you leave this Hellenic chapter, cue up your recorder and deliver a sleepy aside. Shout out to all those ancient Greek road trippers, no Wi-Fi, just limestone panoramas and papyrus Yelp reviews. It's a joke, but it lands like a pebble in the Sphinx's vast courtyard, stirring echoes of travelers past. You dust sand from the recorder, pondering how many more foreign eyes have flickered across these same stones in awe. You take a final look at those carved stripes and receding paws, where that Greek and Egyptian worlds once entwined here in a dance of myth, history, and whispered speculations. Stands as both guardian and storyteller. Its silent grin beckoning you to probe deeper into narratives shaped by every visitor who stopped to wonder. Historians still argue whether the Hellenic gaze preserved or distorted the Sphinx's story. But one thing remains clear. Every new perspective adds another layer to its legend. You turn your back on the great feline, sand shifting at your heels, and set off toward the rising sun, carrying Herodotus's spirit of curiosity on your shoulders. The desert yawns around you, and you step into its golden embrace, ready to chase the next secret waiting beyond the next dune. You wander back to the Sphinx's flank, fingertips grazing deep grooves etched into the limestone over millennia. The surface feels strangely soft under your touch, as though the rock itself has been sanded down by invisible hands. You inhale the dry air, tasting a hint of desert salt, and sense the wind's silent handiwork. Mainstream geologists date these weathered channels to gradual abrasion by sand-laden gusts over thousands of years. A process that sculpted every ridge and furrow long after the original chiseling. Leaning closer, you spot curious V-shaped channels snaking down from the shoulders toward the paws. Some scholars attribute these to wind-driven sand acting like nature's sandpaper. Others point to occasional Nile flood surges, when higher water levels might have lapped at the statue's base and left telltale water lines. You imagine ancient floodwaters pooling here, swirling around the Sphinx's haunches, before receding back into the desert. Historians still argue whether those seasonal inundations ever reached the plateau, or if the Sphinx was always perched well above the Nile's highest swells. A playful breeze lifts grains of sand, sending tiny whirls spinning across the stone. You quirk a smile and joke. Look, the Sphinx has its own personal sandstorm spa treatment. You imagine an ancient beauty blogger praising these grooves as an exfoliation method no tropical sea mud required. That image tickles your mind, even as you acknowledge a fringe claim that these water-fed channels formed during a wet period around 10,000 BC, long before Khafre's reign. That controversial theory envisions torrential rains gouging the Sphinx's features, suggesting a far earlier date for its carving, possibly by an unknown civilization drowning in rising waters. You trace a particularly pronounced groove, descending from the lion's chest, the limestone warm beneath your palm. The contrast between sun-heated stone and shadowed groove makes each channel seem alive, pulsing with geological memory. You shiver at the thought of floodwaters surging here, cold and swift, like a river unleashed from its banks. Fringe enthusiasts call this cataclysmic erosion evidence, positing that the Sphinx was originally a water guardian before it became a solar sentinel. You shake your head at the image of a stone lion performing lifeguard duty at the next deyu, equipped with a tiny stone life buoy. No less. A distant vulture circles overhead, and you recall Robert Schoch's seismic studies from the 1990s, which suggested deep vertical fissures consistent with water erosion. His work ignited a scholarly firestorm, pitting physicists against archaeologists in debates reminiscent of two kids arguing over who gets the last slice of pizza. Yo, bring in the particle physics team. We've got some sand to analyze. Mainstream Egyptologists, however, maintain that the erosion patterns can be explained by wind and temperature shifts alone. A slow dance of thermal expansion and contraction cracking the surface, your fingers dance. Across the face, skimming over micro-pitting where tiny wind-borne grains carved miniature craters. You liken each pockmark to a little crater on the moon. Only here, the moon is a desert cat holding silent court. You step back to gaze at the full profile. Sunlight glinting off horizontal bands of discoloration, traces of mineral deposits leached from rainwater percolating into the rock. Some suggest these bands record the ebb and flow of ancient wetlands, imprinted as natural fossils in stone. Fringe writers dub the Sphinx a climate archive, a stone diary of prehistoric monsoons and river surges. You bend down to scoop a handful of dusty sand from one of the nearby rubble piles. Then let it sift through your fingers. The grains are jagged and chalky reminders of the eroded limestone they came from. You sniff it, tasting chalk on your tongue, and joke quietly. Breakfast is served, sand with a side of spontaneous exfoliation. Still, you can't deny the seductive pull of the water erosion hypothesis. It teases at you like a half-remembered dream. What if the Sphinx was shaped by torrents rather than by copper chisels alone? You stand upright, brushing grit from your palms, and circle around to study the Sphinx's rear. Here, the erosion is subtler, with shallow scallops carved by shifting wind patterns funneling around the lion's haunches. You cup an ear to the rock, half expecting to hear dripping water and auditory hallucination born of fringe excitement. Historians still argue whether those traces reflect original tool marks, later softened by weather or natural cracks that misled early explorers. You raise an eyebrow, weathering or workmanship. The desert wind picks up, and you press yourself against the cool belly of the statue, letting the stone's thermal inertia calm your sun-blistered skin. You imagine floodwaters rising, creeping through the cavern you explored earlier, filling it with silt and whispers of lost treasures. Fringe content often dramatizes this underbelly as a hidden floodplain where Atlantean refugees stepped ashore, chiseled out an apology note, and then vanished beneath rising tides. You grin at the absurdity, a letter home lost to history, reading, "Dear Mom, send more papyrus." Your attention shifts back to the face, where you can almost see the original chiseling lines beneath centuries of erosion. The crisp edges of cheekbones now slope like smooth clay, and the jawline sags ever so slightly under nature's relentless hand. You joke, even stone can't resist a good spa day, envisioning the desert wind as a masseuse gently reshaping the Sphinx's features. Yet each softened ridge carries information clues to weather patterns, temperature swings, and perhaps even rare flash floods that struck the Giza Plateau in epochs past. A stray beetle scuttles across the base, its carapace shining like polished obsidian. You watch as it navigates the rocky terrain, oblivious to water erosion debates and academic squabbles. It seems to embody patience, persistence, and a healthy disregard for deadlines. You laugh, thinking that no conference hall lecture has ever captured the eloquence of a beetle inching along ancient stone. You place both palms on the Sphinx's paws and close your eyes, visualizing the transition from freshly carved limestone to wind-eroded monument. You imagine centuries of storms battering the face, grains of sand swirling like dancers in a cosmic ballet, each one chipping away at perfection. Beneath that dance, you feel a quiet statement: endurance. The Sphinx survives, even as its contours soften, reminding you that erosion is both destructive and poetic. Standing up, you circle once more, letting sunlight catch every weathered channel. You note a faint discoloration line around mid-leg, evidence of sandstorms piling debris against the body over centuries. That line is a natural timeline, marking high water and high sand events, like tally marks on a rock. Fringe enthusiasts call it the Sphinx chronology, a redoubt of climate shifts that predates written records. You muse, who needs tree rings when you have grooves in stone? You back away slowly, leaving behind the weathered grooves that hold their enigmatic testimony. The Sphinx's face may shift over time, but its silent gaze remains steadfast. You tuck away thoughts of watershock theories and wind-whispered grooves, carrying instead the wonder that even the harshest elements bow to this enduring sentinel. As you step into the sunlit plain, you cast one last look at the lion's silhouette, shaped by both human hands and nature's slow hand. You crouch beside a tripod-mounted, ground-penetrating radar unit, its coaxial cable snaking across sun-baked sand like a curious metal serpent. The device hums softly, emitting pulses you can almost feel tickling the air around your ankles. Around you, the desert is silent, except for that gentle electronic heartbeat, the faint hum of a nearby drone scanning the Sphinx's silhouette from above. It's an odd contrast, ancient stone meeting futuristic gizmos. It's a scene that feels more like a sci-fi set than a 4,500-year-old guardian monument. Mainstream archaeologists have been using radar surveys on the Giza Plateau since the 1970s, mapping subsurface features and identifying at least 2 sizable anomalies beneath the Sphinx's causeway area. You watch the laptop screen as colorful bands ripple across it, each hue representing a different density layer underground. Bright reds and neon greens pop up in places you wouldn't expect, narrow corridors or natural sinkholes, maybe both. The readings blink in real time, plotting hidden echoes of rock and voids that lie beneath the limestone exterior. You touched back at dawn. You run a finger along the desert-worn edge of the console, feeling the residual warmth from hours of operation. The operators call out readings like Starship engineers reporting warp core status, signal return at 3.4 meters. Low reflectivity, followed by cavity detected at 7 meters. You chuckle softly, imagining future archaeologists using warp drives to drill through millennia with a single button press. Beam me down a shovel, you half joke. But the screen makes it clear. No futuristic beam will replace good, old-fashioned excavation anytime soon. A gentle breeze rustles the tripods, cables, stirring up fine dust that drifts across the display. You squint through the haze and refocus on the data. A consistent void directly beneath the Sphinx's chest, roughly the size of a small room. Fringe theorists swoon at this discovery, claiming it's the fabled Hall of Records and Underground vault containing papyrus scrolls from Atlantis supposedly hidden there by high priests. You raise an eyebrow at the thought of Atlantean librarians meticulously filing cosmic blueprints beneath Khafre's statue. But the idea lodges itself in your mind, flickering with possibility. Your gaze shifts to a second anomaly near the right. Here, the radar trace dips and arches like a heartbeat pattern gone sideways. Could this be a natural cavern sliced into the bedrock by subterranean water flow? Or was it deliberately carved out as a secret ritual chamber? Historians still argue whether these detected voids represent natural caverns or man-made chambers, intended for ceremonial use. If you imagine priests slipping into these hidden rooms, torches in hand, whispering incantations to the Sphinx's silent spirit. Or perhaps treasure hunters of old blasted through thin walls, seeking gold and instead finding empty air. You stand and dust sand from your knees, shifting closer to the drone operator, who's sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos. Any visual anomalies on your side, you ask, nodding at the drone's monitor. It shows a heat map overlay of the Sphinx's surface. highlighting cooler patches where moisture may linger or where metal supports were inserted during early 20th century. Restorations. You lean in, fascinated by the mosaic of colors tracing every gouge, every repaired fissure. It's like seeing the Sphinx in thermal underwear, an intimate portrait rarely granted to tourists. The drone whirs overhead, its rotors kicking up a miniature whirlwind of sand that puffs around your boots. You wave a hand theatrically, scaring up a cloud of gritty confetti. Thanks for the signal flare demonstration, you quip, and the drone operator grins before feeding fresh commands into the joystick. The machine swoops lower, angling its camera to reveal a faint grid etched into the plateau's surface, remnants of 19th century survey lines from early explorers. Those chalky white marks now show up in infrared as cooler channels where dust has settled differently. It's a subtle reminder that every era leaves its own footprint, even on timeless monuments. The laptop beeps again, drawing you back underground. You pore over a 3D reconstruction generated on the spot. Hollow pockets form a loose L shape beneath the Sphinx's western side, like an underground colonnade long since collapsed. You tap the screen, rotating the model with a finger as if you're sculpting clay. Imagine clearing that out by candlelight, you muse, picturing weary dig teams chiseling at stone chips by lantern glow. But those images give way to excitement when you recall that one of these cavities aligns perfectly with lines drawn on an old papyrus showing temple approaches in alignment that mainstream. Egyptologists confirmed in 1988 it's proof that ancient mapmakers had a system for documenting hidden spaces, even if those maps remain elusive. Your hand drifts to the geophone array next, where slender rods plunge into the sand like scientific spears. You kick one gently, listening for a hollow thump that signals underlying hollows. Vacuum beneath the starboard paw, you announce with a grin, using nautical terms, because why not? The team laughs, and you feel the warm camaraderie of collaborative discovery. It's a rare privilege to be part of a moment when technology peels back the desert's disguise, revealing secrets that lay dormant for millennia. You wipe sweat from your brow and step back, letting the equipment hum at its own rhythm. The drone's camera swivels, capturing high-resolution scans of the Sphinx's temples and enclosures. You catch glimpses of LiDAR point clouds hovering around the column. Capitals, each laser pulse measuring microscopic height differences in chipped stone. You whittle away any lingering doubts. Laser archaeology is no fad. It's become as indispensable to fieldwork as trowels and brushes. Fringe vloggers insist these lasers scan not just stone, but psychic auras, cataloging energy patterns. For ghost hunting apps, can't help but snort, though the idea of downloadable Sphinx vibes has a certain modern charm. A sudden gust whips across the plateau, rattling the radar tripod and kicking up an arid chorus of whispering sand. The screens flicker briefly, and you hold your breath until the consoles resettle. You joke about the desert's attempt at a system reboot, but inside you're buzzing. This raw data marks a turning point. One day, these voids could be clear, enough to map like a subterranean subway, guiding archaeologists into corridors that have never felt a human footstep. Maybe a new generation will slip through sealed entrances, lanterns in hand, discovering scroll fragments and sacred vessels long hidden in darkness. The team calls a break. You kick off your boots to let sand sift away. As you shake your foot, you glance at the Sphinx, standing stoic a few dozen meters away, its paws still over that void you spotted. You imagine drilling a tiny borehole there, slipping a micro camera inside, live streaming the live feed to archaeologists worldwide. Real-time reveal, you muse. No gatekeepers, no spoiler alerts needed. It would be the ultimate unboxing video, but instead of gadgets, you'd unveil ancient chambers packed with secrets. Heat shimmers above the plateau, distorting the Sphinx's features like a rippling mirage. You pocket your phone, nudging yourself to savor the analog moment. Sensors worry, data flowing, ancient stone standing witness. You recall that in 2016, the Scan Pyramids project used cosmic ray muon radiography to peer through the Great Pyramid's heart. Now those same principles guide scans beneath the Sphinx. It's thrilling to think that subatomic particles raining from space might reveal what copper chisels never could. Part science experiment, part Indiana Jones sequel, you whisper, letting your voice trail into the hush as you stroll back toward the Sphinx. The radar crew packs away gear, the drone settles into its case, and the desert reclaims silence. You rest a hand on the statue's flank, feeling the cool touch of limestone still unchanged by technology's gaze. You smile at that tactile proof. No matter how far your instruments delve, some layers remain forever out of reach, guarded by stone, sand, and the enduring enigma of history. You step away, the hum of electronics giving way to the desert wind. Ahead, those concealed voids pulse with possibility, artifacts of human ambition or natural wonder awaiting revelation. And you, standing between ancient stone and modern marvel, feel the weight of progressa bridge between chisels and circuits, whispers and data streams. The Sphinx endures, its gaze unbroken as technology sifts each grain of mystery free. You pause at the threshold of the excavation trench, dust swirling like ghostly confetti around your ankles as you survey the scene where Flinders Petrie first mapped subsurface cavities back in 1886. Mainstream records note that Petrie uncovered small niches and passageways beneath the pause, though none match the grand halls promised by rumor. You inhale the hot, earthy scent of upturned sand and limestone fragments, an aroma equal parts archaeology lab and sun-baked playground. Leaning on your trowel, you imagine fringe enthusiasts swooping in with dramatic flair, declaring these modest cavities were mere decoys hiding a sprawling Atlantean archive just out of sight. You smirk, picturing them in flamboyant capes, declaring, "Behold, the lost librarians of Atlantis." You almost tip your hat, half in respect for their showmanship, half in mock salute to extraordinary claims. You squeeze between wooden support beams, your boots crunching unbroken pottery shards and chipped flint flakes. A distant drone whirs overhead. Remember that solar panel hypothesis from Section 7. Now it hovers above, capturing thermal anomalies that fringe channels interpret as evidence of hidden treasure vaults. Meanwhile, you simply note a cooler patch beneath the surveying grid, hinting at void space, not gospel truth. Sunlight slants in through the open trench, spotlighting a rectangular aperture carved just under the right paw. Fringe theorists whisper that this is the entry to a crystalline hall, built by Atlantean engineers who embedded quartz pillars to channel Earth's magnetic field. You laugh softly, quartz-powered Wi-Fi under a stately Sphinx. Yet you can't deny the sparkle of possibility that glints in your mind. You crouch and shine your flashlight across the aperture's lintel, revealing tool marks consistent with New Kingdom restoration work, likely undertaken under Thutmose, for after his famous dream Stele inspired him to clear sand away. Historians still argue whether Thutmose's crews intentionally extended these passages or merely widened existing niches as part of ritual maintenance. You dust a smudge of soot from the beam and imagine a group of priestess widening corridors by oil lamp light, hums of incantation mingling with the scrape of chisels. Standing, you brush grit from your palms and gaze upward at the Sphinx's slope, where a thin shadow hints at an upper gallery concealed by centuries of wind-blown silt. Fringe channels claim this gallery once housed alien propulsion device, sleek metal fins grafted to stone like modern aerodynamic spoilers. You roll your eyes at the image, rocket-lassoed obelisk boosters tethered by cosmic cables, Still, the notion that the ancients might have borrowed extraterrestrial know-how is almost as entertaining as watching a cat stare at a cucumber. You lean close to a survey rod, marking a suspected cavity edge. The rod's tip jabs at a patch of smoother limestone, where a faint seam suggests a hidden block that might swing open. Your heart flutters with the same anticipation you felt in Section 3's bricked-up corridor, craving that moment when you press a palm to a secret stone eye. You half expect a hiss of air and the clang of latch release. Instead, there's silence, solid, unyielding, and tantalizing. You recall the Hall of Records Mythigar case reportedly predicted its discovery beneath the Sphinx in the early 20th century. A prophecy that fueled countless expeditions. Fringe treasure hunters chased that promise with dynamite, chiseling random walls in hopes of erupting a treasure trove of papyrus scrolls. Meanwhile, mainstream archaeologists cautioned that Case's visions were more New Age daydream than credible testimony. Historians still argue whether any underground archives ever existed or if scribes simply stored records in nearby temple complexes. You squat and scrape a trowel along the trench's edge, uncovering a small fragment of fiancesser blue glaze still gleaming where it caught pigment from an overturned basin. This modest find reminds you of Section 5's alcove of pottery shards and alabaster fragments. No Atlantean artifacts here, just everyday relics of Egyptian ritual life. Yet you can't shake the thrill of fringe lore. Each shard could be a clue in a cosmic puzzle, each glaze a map to hidden doors. Rising, you dust your knees and glance up at the artifact table where docs and charts sprawl like a detective's corkboard. One chart overlays Petrie's original 19th century plans with modern GPR maps, stitching together centuries of speculation. The red circles marking voids look like bullseyes on a dartboard. Hit one and your national news. Fringe vloggers promise they'll go live as soon as any hole wider than a child's head is found. You imagine the inevitable clickbait thumbnails, Sphinx chamber found. Despite the hype, you crouch at the trench's far end and notice mortar lines that don't match Kaffir's era. Someone patched these walls, perhaps 19th century restorers or opportunistic looters faking antiquity to hide stolen relics. Historians still argue whether those anachronistic repairs were protective conservation efforts or clandestine traps set by unscrupulous antiquities dealers. You tilt your head, musing that sand might be the only honest curator. You stand, stretching a sagging back, and lean against the surveyor's tripod, imagining how a grand Atlantean corridor would dwarf this narrow cut. Yet, as you press your palm to the stone, you feel no cosmic hum, only the faint vibration of wind-blown sand rattling through screening panels. You breathe in that dry breeze, tasting grit and possibility in equal measure. Running a finger along the trench's lip, you spot a small Vipera oblongi viper slithering past, reminder that nature sometimes claims these hidden spaces before any human ever does. You imagine a serpent guard posted, two Columbus-style explorers seeking sunken archives. A light joke escapes. No Indiana Jones allowed beyond this point, buddy. The viper pauses, flicks its tongue, and slides on, unimpressed by fringe fantasies. You take a final look at Petrie's grid lines, glowing orange in your torch's beam. You imagine a hidden library of crystalline scrolls, glittering Atlantean Tate modern under the Giza sun, but know that real discoveries are usually humbler. Broken pottery here, chipped limestone there, still the whisper of fantasy threads through every grain of sand, urging you to ask, what if? You step back into the sunlit plain, boots leaving faint impressions that will vanish with the next windstorm. The Sphinx stands above, a stone enigma, absorbing both rational surveys and wild conjecture. You dust your hands together and quip, Atlantis, aliens, or ancient Egyptian clerks, What's it gonna be? The desert breeze tugs at your jacket, as if encouraging you to chase the next layer of myth. You glance once more at that rectangular aperture beneath the paw, where ordinary erosion and historical restorations converge in an ambiguous seam. Mainstream truth or fringe delights, all part of the Sphinx's allure. You sigh contentedly, knowing each theory, however wild, attaches another thread to this lion's timeless tapestry. You kneel on the sun-baked sand at the Sphinx's flank, brushing away layers of grit to reveal a scatter of pottery shards and broken votive figurines. Your fingers curl around the fragments with curious reverence, each piece oddly familiar yet rooted in antiquity. Archaeologists have long reported that these offerings date back to the Old Kingdom's 4th dynasty, around 2500 BC, when priests and worshippers left tokens at the statue's base to secure divine favor for the Aquaro's journey into the afterlife. You lift a mottled shard of red-tinged pottery and turn it over in your palm, noting the faint spiral motif painted in dark slip. It reminds you of the concentric grooves you traced under the Sphinx's paws back in section 3. Same circular symmetry, different context. You imagine a temple attendant holding a bowl of colored clay, carefully swirling the design as part of a ritual invocation. Fringe theorists, however, insist these spirals encode star charts, mapping the heavens for cosmic navigation, an idea so appealing you have expect the next magnesium blue fragment you pull to reveal an Andromedan constellation, the midday sun, beats down as you sift through scattered pieces, shards of alabaster jars still echoing the sweetness of ancient perfumes. Bits of calcite offering plates once glazed in vibrant hues, and tiny animal figurines carved from limestone. You sniff the air, catching whiffs of sun-warmed stone and something lingering like burnt Razuna perfume residue. That suggests these fragments once basked in flickering torchlight. A cheeky thought flits through your mind. Maybe those alabaster jars held ancient eau de cologne, 5,000 years ahead of its time. You press a jagged piece of painted terracotta against your cheek hits. Cool, its rough edge surprising you with a sharp contrast to the searing wind on your neck. The pattern on this shard features a stylized falcon, wings outstretched, its eye gleaming like a black bead. In Egyptian lore, falcons symbolize Horus's skybound vigilance. Historians still argue whether these miniature falcons were left by royal pilgrims or by common folk seeking protection. But either way, you can't deny the thrill of cradling a once sacred emblem between your fingers. A sudden gust raises a swirl of sand that whistles past your ears like a soft, high-pitched chant. You duck your head, laughing at the desert's own ASMR remix. And when the dust settles, you spot a curious green-glazed bead lodged against a limestone flake. This bead's bright hue comes from a copper-rich faience pastan Old Kingdom, mainstay in jewelry and amulets. Fringe enthusiasts claim certain faience beads were calibrated to channel the Nile's magnetic energy, acting as primitive power cells. You snort at the mental image of an ancient Egyptian plugging in a phone charger shaped like a scarab. Carefully, you pour loose sand from your palm, revealing more treasures. Charred olive pits from ritual libations, a fragment of a clay seal, bearing a cartouche that likely belonged to Kafir himself, and a tiny statue head of base, the dwarf god of households and childbirth. You cradle that miniature head, amused that even the deepest mysteries of the afterlife included a protective deity for baking babies and scaring off nightmares. You imagine modern parents leaving base figurines on nursery mantels, then wonder whether you trust your stock portfolio to an ancient dwarf god charm as you push aside a line of cracked amphora handles. You catch sight of a shallow depression in the sand, a footprint pressed into the silt, half covered by shards. You slide your palm along the groove, connecting with impressions left by someone centuries ago, Perhaps a barefoot novice priest carrying a tray of offerings. Historians still argue whether these votive terraces were refreshed daily by temple staff or replenished only during major festivals, but the footprint's existence grounds you in a tangible human moment. You grin at the notion that someone's toe once pressed this exact sand, thinking, "Hope this pleases the gods." You sit back on your heels and line up the shards by color and shape, almost like sorting puzzle pieces. The irregular shapes form a mosaic of ochre, black, green, and ivory, an abstract art installation punishing your sense of order. You think about how easy it is to lose pieces in modern board games. Here, every missing fragment feels like a lost storyline. You joke, "I bet archaeologists invented impatience just by trying to find that one final puzzle piece." From the corner of your eye, you spot a chipped limestone token molded into the silhouette of a lotus flower. This lotus motif appears everywhere in Egyptian art, symbolizing rebirth and the cyclic pattern of sunrise. Fringe lore claims that when these lotus tokens are arranged in a specific geometric pattern, they activate a hidden acoustic resonance within the Sphinx's underbelly. You raise the fragment to your ear, half expecting to hear a hum, but only the wind replies. Still, the romance of that fringe theory nudges your imagination toward peculiar angles. Your gaze shifts to a cluster of broken incense burner-steiny basins, once holding cedar chips and resin during night rituals. You cup one half in your hand, inhaling the memory of smoky pine mingled with sweet spice. Modern incense producers would kill for that bespoke aroma blend. You quip to yourself, "Sphinx Edition limited release incense sold out since 2500 BC. The absurdity lands like a soft drumbeat, punctuating the solemnity of the moment with a grin. Leaning back, you brush a line of dust from your clothes and let your eyes wander over the Sphinx's giant paws, grounding you in scale. Here, fragments of daily piety meet the immensity of a silent guardian. You recall the fringe rumor from Section 9 about Greek pilgrims wanting to carve their names in stone. Perhaps some of these votive shards were discarded replacers after graffiti snafus. Historians still argue whether the practice of leaving votive deposits predated the Sphinx itself. Some suggest it goes back to earlier pre-dynastic shrines on this plateau. That debate bubbles in your mind as you arrange pieces into clusters by dynasty, Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom. Perhaps even New Kingdom leftovers. The afternoon heat rolls across the plain, and you unwrap a water canteen, taking a deliberate sip, before setting it aside on a flat slab. You admire how the cool steel contrasts with ancient terracotta in your line of sight, one effective hydration tool versus countless baked clay vessels, keys. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. If only those priests had stainless steel canteens, they'd never have to store water in broken pots. You tap a shard coated in red ochre dust, crinkling at the silliness dot as you slide your hand through the collection. You pause at a tiny figurine leg molded in faience, the foot missing but the calf's delicate contours intact. It's easy to imagine this once belonged to a larger votive statue of Isis or Bastet. You study the surface and see faint tool marks still visible beneath centuries of dust. You trace the line with a fingertip, feeling the sculptor's final stroke. And you think of the artists who carved the Sphinx itself. They left no less of a fingerprint on history. You rise and place each shard back where you found it, respecting the archaeological principle of context. The act feels ritualistic, echoing those ancient ceremonies that deposited each piece originally. You stand, brushing your hands together and smiling, a pinch of sand scattering like tiny golden applause. You pat your hip pocket, where the Greek coin from Section 9 rests a modern relic among ancient detritus. Bridging epochs, you take one final look at the scattered artifacts at the Sphinx's toes, a deliberate chaos of belief, artistry, and human longing. Each fragment whispers a story of devotion, each break a testament to time's indifferent hand. Historians still argue whether these votive zones were originally formalized temple precincts or informal gathering spots where individuals improvised their own rituals. Regardless, you feel honored to witness this debris of worship, a humble counterpart to the grandeur of stone above. You brush sand from your palms and stand, shoulders broadening in the afternoon light. A desert breeze stirs, carrying the faint ghost of incense and the promise of more secrets to uncover. You share a private smile with the Sphinx's silent form, imagining the priests behind each fragment, now gone yet alive in the shards. They, left behind, you step away, sand crunching underfoot. Already anticipating the next detour, the heated debates among scholars, and the fringe tales that make those debates sparkle. But for this moment, the artifacts have spoken enough. You tuck the Greek coin back into your pocket, letting it jingle against the empty palm where shards once lay, and move on torchlight fading behind you as the Sphinx keeps its quiet watch over the desert's shifting sands. You weave through a cluster of scholars huddled beneath a cream-colored canopy, notebooks and laser pointers in hand. Their mid-argument over construction timelines, voices rising like desert wind gusts. One Egyptologist taps a weather-beaten map showing the Sphinx perched beside Khafre's pyramid. Dated solidly to around 2500 BCE, mainstream fact rooted in stratigraphic analysis and papyrus records. Another counters with core samples taken in the 1980s, insisting those samples confirm 4th dynasty origins. You lean closer, absorbing the hum of passionate debate and wondering if they really need this many hand gestures to settle a date. A geologist points at a grid of erosion profiles plastered to the canopy's side. He traces a jagged red line marking wind-driven abrasion over millennia, then pauses at deeper V-shaped grooves he believes reveal ancient flood levels. You note how those water lines fueled Robert Schoch's controversial water erosion theory in the 1990s, sparking a scholarly uproar. Fringe authors ran with it, claiming the Sphinx must be 7,000 to 5,000 BC old, carved by a civilization long before the pyramids. You stifle a laugh. 7,000 BC would make the Sphinx older than your grandmother's fruitcake recipe. At the next table, epigraphers pore over close-up photos of chipped hieroglyphs inside hidden chambers. One cites a clear cartouche of Kafir, proof the passages date to the same reign as the statue itself. The other spots faint symbols he claims were added during New Kingdom restorations proof. He says that later priests expanded subterranean rooms for ritual use. Imagine those? Hieroglyphs playing hide-and-seek in the dark, only visible under UV light. You joke that if rooms expanded anymore, the Sphinx would need its own IKEA floor plan. A radar specialist unspools printouts of GPR and seismic scans, pointing to two sizable anomalies beneath the pause. His voice dips theatrically. These could be hidden chambers sealed millennia ago. Nearby, a skeptical architect tilts his fedora over one eyebrow and declares them natural sinkholes or distended fault lines. The heat is so intense it feels like watching cats argue over a laser pointer each side, convinced its dot is the one true mystery. You lean in, imagining treasure hunters descending through dust-filled shafts, only to discover cross. The sand, a fringe theorist wearing mirrored aviators, brandishes a battered paperback by John Anthony West. He IPs excitedly to a chapter arguing the Sphinx precedes all pyramids. It's possibly crafted by Atlantean engineers who imparted cosmic knowledge before vanishing under rising seas. You squint at his reflection and quip, "Nice shades did the Atlanteans invent Ray-Bans too." He grins and insists the Sphinx's head is too small for a lion, proving it was recarved from an earlier eroded sculpture. You picture a giant lion bust reclining on its side, waiting for a renovation crew with power tools. A weary conservator polishes a fragment of limestone chipped from the right shoulder. She explains that microscopic analysis of chisel striations matches tool usage from Kaffir's era copper blades and dolerite pounders. It's conclusive evidence, she says, anchoring the statue firmly in the 4th dynasty. You nod, appreciating her calm presence amid the academic storm, and joke that if copper tools built this, you owe a shout-out to prehistoric beachbody workouts. You drift toward a circle of dowsers brandishing pendulums, hoping to detect water veins or secret doorways. They sway in rhythm, eyes closed, chanting softly like a low-budget seance. A nearby physicist rolls her eyes and scoffs at energy readings, calling them a distraction from empirical data. You can't help but laugh. This field expedition has everything from hard science gadgets to psychic spoons. You muse that it's like a rock concert lineup gone off beat, lasers, drums, and a kazoo solo, slipping between tents. You note remnants of 19th century surveys chalk lines fading on the plateau floor, drawn by Lepsius's team in 1843. Their meticulous plotting established baseline maps still referenced today. A historian adds that early surveys mislocated the Sphinx's center line slightly, leading to decades of minor excavation missteps. You grin at the idea of cartographers in pith helmets arguing over 6 inches of erots, the archaeology equivalent of 2 chefs bickering over teaspoon measurements. You pause where wind-scoured parchments flutter on a clipboard, inscriptions detailing arguments over a pre-pyramid date. Some hold that stylistic comparisons with pre-dynastic sculptures suggest an earlier carving period, long before Kafir. Others point to the Sphinx's alignment with Kafir's causeway as undeniable proof it was part of his master plan. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx predates the pyramids by millennia or if it was always conceived as Kafur's cosmic sentinel. Stepping back, you watch the sun's late afternoon rays skim the Sphinx's paws, casting long shadows over the huddle of experts. The chorus of voices ebbs and flows like a desert tide, each theory rising and receding in turn. You lean against a surveying tripod, sand spilling from your boots as you absorb the scene. It's a symposium of conviction, filled with data plots, spirited gestures, and a few half-whispered fringe fantasies. And through it all, one truth remains clear. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx predates the pyramids or stands as Kafir's monumental legacy. You stand beneath a star-sprinkled sky as moonlight pools around the Sphinx, washing its features in silvery hues that make every ridge and scar glow like a fossilized heartbeat. The desert night breathes around you, warm and still, carrying the distant rustle of an owl's wings and the occasional caw of that same crow you startled at sunrise. You probably didn't plan on nocturnal birdwatching, but here you are, squinting upward and wondering if that crow is reliving its morning cameo. The Sphinx's silhouette shifts subtly under the lunar glow, the headdress stripes turning into soft waves of light and shadow. Mainstream Egyptologists note that the Sphinx's eastward gaze also captures starlight from Orion's belt on certain winter nights, linking the monument to celestial cycles that guided ancient burial rituals. You tilt your head, imagining priests lying prone on the plateau, tracing star patterns on papyrus scrolls while stones pulsed with cosmic resonance beneath them. A gentle breeze stirs, carrying the scent of cooling limestone and something faintly floral-like remnants of jasmine offered in moonlit rites. You recall those shallow channels of erosion we examined in Section 10, now illuminated by silver beams, appearing like a network of lunar veins. Fringe theorists claim these grooves once funneled moonlight into hidden chambers in Atlantean Stargate for interdimensional travel. You chuckle at the notion of cosmic tourists checking in via a stone portal. Though the idea of ancient Skype had a certain retro appeal, you press your fingertips to the Sphinx's chin, feeling the cool stone pulse under your touch, as if the monument itself were breathing slow, deep breaths. Historians still argue whether nocturnal ceremonies took place directly at the statue's base or within adjacent temples, debating if moonlit offerings ever awakened the guardian's animating spark. Whether or not those rituals happened, you sense a sacred hush here tonight. A pause in time when the Sphinx transcends its stony form, leaning back. You lie on the sand, propping your head on a jacket, folded like a lumpy pillow. You listen to the desert's lullaby, distant rodents, scuttling, wind-shaping dunes, and the soft hum of your own breath. It's a gentle ASMR of nature, and stone no white noise machine required. You wonder if the ancient masons ever stayed up this late, counting stars instead of counting chisel strokes. Dreaming of eternity under the same moon, a meteor streaks overhead, a fleeting spark against the velvety black. You blink, half expecting the Sphinx's eye to glimmer in response, winking at you like a stagehand cue. You whisper a joke to yourself, best late-night cameo ever, though silence replies. You imagine Atlantean engineers tapping in Morse code with moonbeams, another fringe idea to file under desert daydreams. Rising, you pace the statue's flank, following the curve of its haunches until you reach the broken corridor entrance. Cue First Pride in Section 3. Moonlight spills into the shaft, revealing patchy bricks and dusty antechambers where your torch once danced. You pause at the sealed block etched with eye motifs, now glowing like a guardian's watchful stare. You half expect those eyes to blink open at midnight, granting passage to secrets still buried beneath a pause. You take a deep breath, tasting the night's chill mixed with the dry warmth of sand that never fully cools. You press your palm against the Sphinx's flank, offering a silent thank you for this nocturnal audience. A bat flutters past, a living punctuation mark to your solitary reverie. You grin, silent sentinel, you've got my attention. Then, quiet settles again, timeless, vast, and inviting. You step back into the open desert, turning your gaze toward the pyramids, their outlines faint against the starfield. The Sphinx remains behind you, its secrets pulsing faintly in the hush. As you head for camp, you carry the monument's cool memory on your skin, the desert's whisper in your ears, and a sense that some mysteries only reveal themselves in stillness. You lie back on warm sand, the moon tracing silver patterns on your eyelids as you let the night's hush cradle you. Here at the desert's end, the stars hum a lullaby older than any bedtime story. And the Sphinx stands guard like a silent grandfather, its form softened by moonlight into a benevolent silhouette. You feel the gentle weight of centuries lift from your shoulders as you sink into the sand's embrace. Each grain a tiny reminder of time's patient passage. Imagine the desert wind as a soft fan, swirling around you, carrying faint scents of jasmine, myrrh, and sun-warmed stone. Exhalation drifts upward to mingle with stardust, a quiet offering to the cosmos. Your heartbeat slows, syncing with the distant rustle of dunes and the hush of nocturnal life stirring just beyond the Sphinx's pause. There's no urgency here, only the gentle pulse of wonder and the desert's timeless rhythm. Let your thoughts unwind, each one slipping away like footprints erased by wind. Remember the crow's call at dawn and the torches flicker in underground halls. But know that darkness now invites rest and reflection. The Sphinx's secrets can wait until morning light, when you'll wake renewed, ready to chase dust-laden whispers once more. Breathe deeply, filling your lungs with cool night air, and release any tension in your limbs. Feel the sand cradling your knees and the subtle vibration of ancient stone beneath your palm. In this soft tranquility, you are both traveler and witness, part of a story that spans millennia. Now, close your eyes, surrender to the deserts. Song, and let sleep guide you beyond pyramids and starlit corridors. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.